let's talk about The Book Thief. In summary, perfection. 5 stars, 10s across the board. I have no notes. And you know what I'm like. You know how annoyingly pedantic I am when I get in front of this camera and I talk about books. I look for things to complain about. I am one of the most cantankerous, you know, curmudgeonly, annoyingly particular people when it comes to reading books. Loved it. So good. 5-star read. In my top 3, top 5 of the year. No notes, really, just wow. I am trying to remember the last time that I read a book that was this long and was on subject material this heavy, and yet it felt lighter than air. The reading experience has so much levity to it, which you would not believe for something that is about 1940s Germany, heavily features the Holocaust. Like, it is upsetting, but at the same time, it's told with a sort of childish, reckless abandon that feels... it's enjoyable. Making the narrator deaf? Oh, stroke of genius. Why don't more books do this? Because it so easily removes any issue with, like, the omniscient narrator, because oftentimes I get a bit annoyed when the narrator is this sort of like third person entity that's beyond the whole story, because it's just like, well, what's going on? Who are you? So actually making it death in World War II, perfect. Death is very busy that time in human history, of course. And it completely removes the need for any sort of specificity, because we don't know what death's like. Death can be characterised in any particular way. We know nothing about death. And so I thought it was very smart. It was very, very smart. And the book had a sense of humour with death as well, which again, it added some lightness to this subject matter that is so serious. I just think this book is so important as well, especially with my generation. We're at an all-time high for Holocaust deniers. There are people out there who will swear down that this never happened, and it most certainly did. Like, go out there and have a look at the memorials. It's real, like, it's upsetting. And I think books like this are necessary. We do need to keep revisiting it because, of course, as trite as it might sound, if we, you know, forget our history, we are condemned to repeat it. And that's very much the lesson of this book and the nature of, you know, humans. And I liked that because it's in the POV of the Germans, there was still so much heart to it. You know, like, you couldn't possibly look at the German people in this and think, oh yeah, they're the villains. Like, oh, I'm so glad they're being defeated. Like, it's terrible what the Führer's doing, but it's incredibly humanising in its portrayal of the other side. You're like, oh, okay, these people, they were misled. They were influenced by an evil dictator. That doesn't make them evil people by extension. And I just love the way that this book demystifies a topic that, especially now, is so misunderstood and is so taken for granted. And more than anything, it's a book about books. You know, meta is so rarely done right these days. I think the problem is some authors try to be a bit too self-aware to the point where it's like, yeah, okay, we get it. You know, it's a story about storytelling. Groundbreaking. But this book actually is, because it's based around the time of the 1940s. This was a time where there was mass book burning. You know, books by Jewish authors were considered forbidden property. Even certain topics like maths was largely censored because it was believed to be like the work of the Jewish people. So having our main character collect all of these books, stealing them from the fire, stealing them from the mayor's library, like, that was all so clever. It was an amazing way to show, like, the determination of the human spirit, the escapism that literature provides when you're in hard times, being able to escape into a book to run away from the horrors of people and events around you. Like, yes, what a book. And you know what I found so refreshing as well? The focus was on the journey and not the ending, which for me, more books need to do this. So many people get bogged down by, oh, how's it going to end? What's going to happen? And then, you know, when they get spoiled, they're so upset. You know, I get people all the time like, oh, you spoiled this book for me. But for me, when I'm reading, it's never about that. It's about how we get from A to B. It's not the B itself. And I feel like this book, it gets that as well. Like, I feel like I have the same philosophy as this author, because there are multiple points in this book where death actually spoils what's happening at the end. And I liked that because it meant that you weren't focusing on the wrong things. It wasn't supposed to be about the destination, it was how we got there, and that's what was important. And the book, just yes, exactly what I wanted. When I tell you that the location of Himmel Street was so fully realised, so three-dimensional, it felt like you could leave your house and walk down it. It was so perfectly, like, actualized. Like, it was perfect. It was like, oh yes, this is a real town with real people. And that just made it so much more heart-wrenching when you see what happens to it. You see the bombings that take place during World War II, the people whose lives are completely torn apart. And because we had that foundation built where we suddenly knew all of these relationships between these people, when certain people do die and death comes and takes them, the real gravity of that actually hits, and it feels like, you know, a modern day conflict that you're experiencing with them. Like, yes, this is what we need from storytelling. You know what, I'm just going to stop myself right here, because I'm sure I could waffle on and on about this book for several more minutes, but I think you get the idea. And I'm sure a lot of you already knew how fantastic this was, because when I asked all of you to vote on what book I should read next, there were a lot of votes for this, and I am so grateful to the people who picked this, because it is an unforgettable read. Like, I am going to be thinking about this years and years down the line, and I'm sure at some point I will reread this, because it has that sort of reread potential. It was very powerful, fully rendered, emotive, yes, all of it. Go read it if you haven't. Absolutely go read it. Like, what a masterpiece.